Good afternoon, brothers and sisters in the Dharma. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for this first sharing in this tour. This is actually the 7th occasion I'm coming to the Philippines to conduct Dhamma Dutta tour. I think some of you have been following me in the past years that I've been coming since 2014. So this is the 7th occasion. Before I begin, I must thank the management of Universal Wisdom Park, and also especially the founder, Dr. Mariano, who is very kindly offered this place for me to stay. And during this period, I'll be conducting several lectures and laughter yoga sessions here. So today is the first of a series of 4 lectures based on the Eightfold path. Right, so this is called the Sublime Eightfold Way lecture series, and today's topic is selective thinking. Right. The next 3 weeks there will be 3 other topics which are all progressive, so hopefully you can attend all of them, not just 1 or 2. So they're all in progression. So today we will focus on how to begin the practice of this Eightfold Way, and next week I will talk a little bit about how to tame this greed, lust and hatred when these emotions arise, how we can learn to cultivate and tame it so that we can actually get rid of these unwholesome emotions that are arising. Then the following week I will be talking about a very important topic which is called loving kindness. So I will draw from the direct teachings of the Buddha to explain in the Buddha's words what he meant when he said loving kindness. And the Pali word used there is metta, which in Sanskrit is called maitri, meaning universal benevolence and loving kindness. And then following that, my last lecture here, then I will talk about meditation. Right. So for the next 4 weeks, I hope you can make it every Saturday. This week is afternoon. The next 2 weeks will be morning. And I think after the lecture, there will be lunch, right? For next week, the morning lecture, there will be vegetarian lunch being served. So you can stay on for the lunch, the next 2 lectures, and the last one will be afternoon. Okay. So without further ado, basically today's sharing is on selective thinking. And it is really about shaping our lives through using conscious, rational thinking. Because we are endowed with a mind that can help us think. But at the same time, this mind also has these emotional arousals. So there's really 2 streams of thinking going on. One is conscious, right, which is what I'm going to be talking about. The other one is the unconscious arousal of emotional thoughts. That is what I'm going to focus on next week. And this arousal of emotional thoughts will lead us to think in very lustful, greedy, angry and hateful ways. These thoughts arise without our control, so we have to learn to tame them. So basically these 2 streams of thoughts are ongoing. One stream you're aware of, the other one just arises and disturbs you. Right? So we're going to take a look at these 2. So today's sharing is basically to explore the Buddha's teaching from a modern and scientific perspective. This is one of the things I like to do the most, and that is what the Buddha taught. I will then do some research from science, from the area of brain science, neuroscience, and also from psychology, and try to combine them and share with you the scientific support of the Buddha's teaching. I must say that I'm very blessed to have met my teacher. His name is Venerable Dr. Punaji. He came from Sri Lanka. He is now a naturalized American. He is 88 years old right now. And at the moment he is back in Sri Lanka visiting. He came from a background of an aristocratic family. And then as he grew up, he became very good at meditation, and eventually he decided to renounce. Before he renounced, he actually was a medical doctor. So he has very strong knowledge about medicine and all that. Right? He was a medical doctor. And after he became a monk, and that was for the last 50 years as a monk, he went on to study and obtain a doctorate degree in psychology. He then had a second doctorate degree in philosophy. So we like to joke with him. We call him doctor 3 times over. First he's a medical doctor, then he's got a doctorate degree in psychology, a doctorate degree in philosophy. And with his background, I was very fortunate to have learned so much from him. So today's sharing is largely due to the learning I have learned from him, and also some research that I've done, and that's what I like to share. So we will basically be talking about, we will start talking about the Four Noble Truths in a simple way. Just a quick nutshell of what is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is the Buddha's foundational teaching. The very first sermon he started teaching that, and based on that he went on to teach all the related things. But the foundation of the Buddha's teaching is the Four Noble Truths. And in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha used the word dukkha. Dukkha is often translated as suffering. And that's why a lot of people think, oh, Buddhism is so negative or so pessimistic because it's talking about suffering. But that is not true. That is actually a misunderstanding of what Buddha meant. The word dukkha does not really refer to this severe suffering that we're talking about. It could be a little thing like being stressed. That is dukkha. Dissatisfactoriness. There are so many ways that we feel unhappy, and that is dukkha. So dukkha is a combination of many different aspects going on that makes us unhappy. So the Buddha's teaching is not about dukkha, but about how to free ourselves from dukkha. So the Buddha is like a kind of a doctor to the mind and the body to help us free ourselves from suffering. Now, if you think about it, when you feel sick, you're coughing, you feel fever, you go and see a medical doctor. The doctor gives you medicine, and you take the medicine, and then you will be healed. So what is the role of the doctor? The role of the doctor is to heal you from your sickness. So if you talk about what does the doctor do, do you say the doctor is about sickness? Oh no. You are talking about the doctor is about cure. That's what it is. The doctor's job is there to cure you. In the same manner, when we speak about Buddhism, Buddhism is not about suffering. It is about the freedom from suffering. So it's a different perspective, shifting of the perspective to understand that what Buddhism is teaching us is how to be free from suffering through a series of understanding. And this is taught, this series of understanding is described as the Eightfold Path, or the Eightfold Way. So we're going to touch on that today, on this Eightfold Way. So basically we're going to take a look at what is dukkha, and commonly translated as suffering, and how it arises. We are also going to take a look at what is the mind according to the teachings of the Buddha. And this is amazing. 2,600 years ago, when the Buddha described what is the mind made of, rather how does the mind work, his teaching then, the brain scientists today are beginning to realize how true it is. All the research that brain scientists are coming up, all the findings they're coming out, talking about the workings of the mind, it is beginning to agree with exactly how the Buddha described how the mind works. So I'm going to explain to you Buddha's description of the mind based on 3 aspects of the mind, or 3 mental experiences: perception, cognition, and affection, right? Affective process. And then we are going to take a look at how this suffering arises, how we react to it, aroused by feelings, our emotional arousals arise, and then we react to it emotionally, and this is what causes a lot of suffering. And finally, how we can overcome all that through selective thinking. Right? We go back to the root of the Buddha's teaching. When the Buddha first became enlightened, the first thing the Buddha taught is a sermon called Setting into Motion the Wheel of Dharma. The very first sermon. Commonly in Pali it is called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. It's a mouthful. Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra basically is setting into motion the wheel of Dharma. Meaning, based on this sermon, the Buddha began his teaching. And in this sermon, the Buddha expounded on the Four Noble Truths. So what are these Four Noble Truths? The first one, he says that there is dukkha. And of course, the Westerners translated the word dukkha to suffering. So let's stick to that word. But I'm going to explain a little bit more about that later on. What is suffering? So we talk about there is suffering. The second noble truth is basically the origin or the cause of suffering. How does suffering arise? Right? How did it start to affect us? And then the third one is pointing out at the fact that suffering can be ended. There is a solution to it. We can end this suffering. And finally, the fourth noble truth is the method and the way leading to the ending of the suffering. So that is basically these four noble truths. So let's take a look at the very first noble truth. There is suffering, or there is dukkha. What did the Buddha mean? Now, the Buddha described there are 8 aspects or 8 areas where we experience suffering. First, he mentioned the 4, which is very straightforward. All of us basically can understand this pretty easily. Birth is suffering, because when a baby is born, the first thing a baby is born, what is the first experience the baby experiences, assuming it's a natural birth? The doctor who delivers will pick up the baby by the foot and then whack him in the backside. Right? That is getting the baby to start crying out, and that is the first thing that is done, right? And in the process of giving birth, the mother undergoes a lot of suffering. We all know that, especially for those who have delivered babies. So birth is suffering. And then as we grow old, aging, as we age, we begin to experience all kinds of suffering along the way. And then people who fall sick, illness is suffering. And finally, at the time of death, right, if we are not careful with the way we condition our mind, we can also experience suffering. It is possible to die peacefully, but not many people have the blessing to end their life in a very peaceful way. Many people end their life in a very painful way. Right? So these are the first 4 areas of suffering, first 4 conditions of suffering. And then the Buddha went on to talk about 3 more. Altogether there are 8. So now number 5, he said that separation from what is pleasing is suffering. That means if you have experienced something enjoyable, now you no longer have it. That is suffering. Right? Because if you have always liked something and you have been enjoying it, and suddenly you no longer have it, that is suffering. Take for example, what is the most common thing many of us are enjoying? Cell phone. What happens if one day you drop your cell phone and it is spoiled, you have to send it in for repair, and the workshop says it'll take 3 weeks. For the next 3 weeks you have no cell phone. Is that suffering or is that happiness? Yeah? So that is the example here. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. There are also other kinds of separation. Your loved ones, right? Gone overseas for some time, that is suffering. Those of you who have children who went overseas to study, or those of you who have brothers and sisters who went overseas to study. So separation from whatever people, things or experiences that you have enjoyed, they no longer have it. That is suffering. Right? Then union with what is displeasing is suffering. That means if it is something that made you unhappy and you are stuck with it, that is suffering. Right? And simple example is that maybe a colleague, right? Let's say you have a colleague that you work with that person, and that person doesn't do his job very well, and in the office it makes you very angry and you're very unhappy. Then you ask your boss, can I transfer to another department? Okay, the boss transfer you to the next department, the other department where you're no longer with that colleague and you thought wonderful. Next minute the boss decided that maybe he also needs to be transferred there, and then he's transferred there and he becomes your partner again. Now union with what was displeasing is suffering. That is another example where something you know is hurtful to you, makes you unhappy, and it keeps coming back to you. That is suffering. The seventh one is that the Buddha also pointed out not to get what one wishes for. If you have certain aspirations, you wish for something. Let's say you run a business. You wish your business to do well. You wish your business to progress and expand and make profit. But year after year, your business is not succeeding. So you're really not getting what you wish for. That is suffering. If you work for an employer, you work very hard, you've done a wonderful job, you always do the best you can. And in fact, you outperform everybody else in the company. And you're thinking that end of the year, your employer will give you the best increment, the best raise, so that the next year you get a better salary. And at the end of the year, your boss says to you, business is not so good. I'm sorry, there's no raise for the moment. Bear with us for another 2-3 years. When business comes back, we will give you a raise. So what you wish for, you don't get. That is suffering. But of all these, the last one, number 8, is the one that brings us continuous suffering. And now this is the part which is not so easy to comprehend, but I hope in the course of the next few lectures I should be able to elaborate more on that, and then you can understand more. And this is basically says the 5 aggregates subject to clinging is suffering. Now 5 aggregates is actually the process of perception. When light enters the eye, we begin to see something. Right? When sound enters the ear, we begin to hear something. So this is the process of perception. Perceptions arise because light enters the eye, sound enters the ear, and your tongue tastes something, and your nose smells something, and your body touch come into contact with something. So there is a rising of this perception. Now I have experienced something. I can see something, I can hear something. That experience, if you cling on to that experience, that is suffering. What do I mean by clinging on? We do that all the time, day in and day out. We are doing it. Take for example your body. Your body is a vessel that carries signals from your environment, brings it into the brain, and in the process of bringing it into the brain, there is this activity called the mind. You become aware of your environment. You wake up in the morning, accidentally you knock your hand against the wall and it hurts. And then you say, oh, my hand hurts. You know, what's the first word you used? My. See? These thoughts naturally arise. You personalize every experience. My hand hurts. You walk down the street, accidentally you kick a lamppost, and then you feel the pain in the toe. And then you say, oh, I feel pain in my toes. What is the first word you used? I. See, we always personalize every experience we have. Everything we experience, if you make a sentence describing that experience, 9 out of 10, I, me, or mine is the first word. You eat something very tasty. What's the first thought that comes to your mind? I like this food. Right? What's the first word? I. This is what the Buddha meant. Every experience we have, an experience in the body arises with the 5 aggregates. It is called the 5 aggregates. Right? So these 5 aggregates arising cause you to experience something. Either seeing something, hearing something, smelling or tasting something, or touching something. Then you say, oh, I am experiencing it. Right? And this is the notion where we create the idea there is this I very strongly, the I, me, or mine very strongly, and that is suffering. So these are the 8 conditions of suffering. Now, the Buddha used the word dukkha. Right? The word dukkha actually is not meaning suffering as in something very terrible has happened, like somebody died or something like that. It could be something very simple. Stress is suffering. Right? Your mind getting disturbed, and that is called distress. That is also a kind of suffering. And something happens and you're not happy, dissatisfactoriness. That is also suffering. So this is what the Buddha meant when he uses the word dukkha. Dukkha simply means these conditions that give rise to suffering. But if we talk about what is really going on around us, who are we? So we ask this question, who are we? If you want to think in Buddhist terms, basically it is to understand that we are arising in this environment, we interact with this environment. So we are organisms in an environment. That's really what it is. This body is an organism. And this organism, right, there are two things happening inside this organism. One is called metabolism. This is what keeps this body alive. When the body is alive, then there is the mind that is going on. When the body dies, the body stops, then there is no more mind, right? Basically, that's how it works. So when you are alive, you can think, you can experience. When you're dead, there is no more such experience anymore. It's finished. End of story. So we have metabolism going on in the body. And the other thing that's going on is because we are all equipped with 5 physical senses, 5 physiological senses in the body. So we are able to see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. And that is also enabling us to experience the environment. So we can experience the environment being able to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. So that helps us understand what's going on. But if we were to look at it scientifically, physiologically, what's going on here? Well, we have this body, and because of this central nervous system, which is made of the brain and the spinal cord, we're able to experience the environment because this central nervous system is connected to all our organs. So when light enters the eye or sound enters the ear, it stimulates these nerves which carry the impulse to the brain. So the brain begins to process these impulses. And in processing these impulses, the brain then sends out signals to the rest of the body to react. If you feel thirsty and you want to pick up this bottle to drink, it commands your hand to reach out to pick up the bottle. If a mosquito comes towards your ear, and then you don't like it, it commands your hand to swing it away. So these are the interactions as a result of instructions from the brain. So this is really what's going on. So when we think about the brain, then the brain has evolved over millions of years into 3 main parts. The innermost is called brain stem, and this is our survival brain. And the survival brain is responsible for keeping us alive by regulating our heart rate, regulating our blood pressure, and digestion, and various things as autonomic things that's going on inside the body. Then we have another part of the brain, the inner brain, called the limbic system. This is the part of the brain which is responsible for your emotions. This is the part of the brain which is actually causing a lot of suffering, because emotions is what reacts to stimulations from the environment. And then we have the outermost brain, which is the thinking brain, right? This thinking brain helps us think, become conscious. So this cerebral cortex is more the thinking brain, the conscious thinking that is going on, right? Basically, it's an interaction of all these parts that enable the mind to arise. Now, at this point, we have to understand there is a part of the brain that is responsible for our suffering and our unhappiness, and that is this limbic system. Deep inside this limbic system, now I'm not going to go much deeper than this, I just have to describe this to you. It's very important to understand this because it will help you understand why you get angry, why you react in the way you do. Deep inside this limbic system, there is a structure called the amygdala. Amygdala, amygdala. That is buried inside. What does the amygdala do? What the amygdala does is that it senses whatever experiences from the environment, everything you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, that impulse that comes into the brain passes through the amygdala first. So the amygdala actually begins to react. Now, if it detects something which it determines to be threatening to the life, that means threatening to this organism, it will react and cause emotional reaction. Now, what kind of experiences is threatening? For example, when you see something, bright light, very strong bright light, that is threatening. Or when you hear something, you hear loud explosion, loud sound, that is threatening. When you touch something very hot, that is threatening. Whenever these threatening sensory experiences arise, the amygdala reacts. And it reacts by producing this fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And this is commonly called the stress reaction. Now, if it is something totally unknown to you and you have experienced it for the first time, it causes you to freeze. Isn't it? Sometimes you walk down the street and then something you've never seen before frightens you. People freeze up. So that's the freeze part. Or if you experience something which you are aware of that is threatening, let's say a robber coming towards you, right, with a knife, wants to attack you. The moment you see someone coming towards you with a knife, you want to turn away and run. So that is the flight part. That reaction is your amygdala. Or sometimes you feel you're very strong and this person who is a bully and wants to bully you, you fight back. So there's freeze, flight, or fight reaction. Right? And a lot of these are very automatic. You're not aware of it. Right? The amygdala reacts to it. So the amygdala reacts to this to protect you from harm. That's what the role of the amygdala is. The amygdala has evolved over millions of years to react to sensory experiences that may be threatening to you staying alive. So it causes your body to react. For example, you walk down the street peacefully, and then through the corner of your eye, you see a very fast approaching object. Now, it could be a truck out of control heading towards you. And if you were to turn around and take a look and say, what is this? Oh, it's a truck. The truck is coming towards me. If I don't jump out of the way, the truck will run over me and I will be killed. Oh, maybe it's time for me to jump out of the way. Do you have time to think like that? No. When something comes towards you very quickly, what happens? Your body reacts. Because it's that fast approaching object. That is what the amygdala does. The amygdala senses these inputs and causes the body to react. Right? Out of the blue, I throw a ball at you and suddenly, you catch it or hit it out. That is the amygdala reacting. You don't have time to think, oh, Billy is throwing a ball at me now, so maybe I should try to catch it. Then you don't have time to think like that. You automatically react. That reaction is the work of the amygdala. So the amygdala, unfortunately, has a paradoxical role. First, it is there to protect you from harm. But unfortunately, the amygdala can also be aroused unnecessarily. So, for example, you're sitting there reading a book peacefully, and you're engrossed in reading, and your family member comes from behind you, touch you on the shoulder. What happens? You get a spook, huh? That is really what's going on. That reaction is also the reaction of the amygdala. But day in and day out, we experience things from what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch that is causing this reaction, stress reaction. We are not aware of it, but it is happening all the time. Sometimes even the sound of a word can cause that. I can say the word ma'asim, for instance. Some of you are already feeling a little bit of sourness in your mouth. Yeah? If you don't feel it, then I'll describe to you. And this, for example, when we went to school in elementary school during our time, the teachers did not have the luxury of whiteboard and marker pen. What did they use? Blackboard and chalk. So the teacher writes on the blackboard. After writing, he asks one of the kids, can you erase the blackboard? And some of these kids are very naughty. As before they erase the blackboard, they have very long nails. What do they like to do? They scratch the blackboard and it goes. Now, how many of you right now are feeling this tingling sensation in your body? Are you feeling it? Yeah. Something? Some reaction? Yeah? Right. So this reaction is the amygdala reacting. And the amygdala causes the release of hormones, causing these tingling bodily sensations. Right. So that part of the amygdala, unfortunately, when it is aroused unnecessarily, can cause you a lot of stress. And that is the terrorist in your brain. So the amygdala has two functions. One, it is there as your bodyguard. But the other, it is like a terrorist, releasing hormones in the body the moment you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something that may be threatening to you. It may be really threatening, or it may not be, but it will still arouse the release of hormones. So let's take a look at a short video on this.
As humans have evolved, it's doubled in size. It weighs only 3 pounds, but it consumes 20% of all the fuel our bodies take in, generating enough energy to keep a light bulb burning.
And you have to consider the brain having evolved like an old house, where we just added different rooms. And so there's all these stairways and connections.
In the basement is the oldest part, called the brain stem. It's something we share with reptiles and other mammals. It's what keeps us alive, governing vital functions like heart rate, respiration, digestion, and blood pressure. Things that happen without having to think about them.
The next level up, the first floor, more evolved. Hundreds of thousands of years later, it's called the limbic system. And this is very important in the processing of emotions.
Within the limbic system are the amygdala, 2 nuggets of tissue, 1 in each half of the brain. They are no bigger than a fingernail, yet they are the brain's central command center for our emotional reactions. One of the simplest and strongest of these is fear, a primal emotion we all share.
If you had to pick one brain region that was most important in fear, it would be the amygdala.
What scientists discovered is that as humans evolved, another part of the brain, called the cortex, also became involved in processing fear.
The part that makes us most human about the brain is our frontal cortex.
If the amygdala is the first floor, the cortex is the second floor of the brain. It's the brain's thin, wrinkly outer layer that's divided into 4 sets of lobes.
If you unfolded the cortex of a monkey, it would be about the size of a piece of paper. If you unfolded our cortex, it's about 4 sheets of paper large. And the reason it's wrinkly is because you have to squish that all inside of the skull.
The frontal lobes comprise the area just above our eyes, and these are the newest rooms of the brain. As humans evolved, the frontal lobes became the place where conscious, rational thought is processed. It's where we do our problem solving.
The frontal lobes are so interesting because they are really the conductor of the brain. They synchronize all activity.
Scientists made a major breakthrough in fear research when they found that information from our senses reaches the amygdala almost twice as fast as it takes to get to our frontal lobes. The speed of the different brain signals means unless we instinctively know how to react to a potential threat, we may freeze in fear, waiting for the frontal lobes to catch up to figure out the right response.
Part of what happens with fear and panic is the unknown, is not knowing what to do next, and so your brain essentially freezes the way a deer freezes in the headlight.
So the amygdala may get very fast signals about fear, but sometimes they're wrong, and quickly the situation may say to you, no, it's not a fear situation, and you're not afraid. So these very quick amygdala signals that you get can be controlled in sort of a top-down way.
So the amygdala, when the amygdala is aroused and reacts, it can be controlled from a top-down way. What does she mean by top-down? She means the thinking brain. The thinking brain has the ability to train ourselves, train our mind so that we can become more peaceful and calm. And this is really what we mean by selective thinking, by choosing the way to think. So today we're going to take a look further at how we can choose to think in a manner that can help us to be more peaceful and happy. So this thinking part is actually the frontal lobe. In our cerebral cortex is made of 4 lobes. The parietal lobe, the occipital lobe at the back, the parietal lobe over the top, and then the temporal lobe on the side, and finally the frontal lobe, which is our thinking brain. In the frontal lobe, where the thinking brain is, it is responsible for these main functions. But of all these main functions, there are only 2 statements there that is most responsible for our happiness. And this is where selective thinking comes in. This is the function of decision making, goal setting, planning, judgment, reasoning, and rationalizing. Decision making means deciding on what to do, how to train your mind, whether or not you want to attend a talk like this to maybe learn something or attend other talks as well that can teach you, expand on this knowledge. There might be other similar talks going on. So wanting to join these talks and listen to these lectures, that is a decision you make. And when you have made a decision, you set the goal. You want to come here. So you will find ways and means to get here. Goal setting. And when you have set your goal, you plan the route, you plan the actions that are needed that can help you accomplish your goals. So these are some of the important functions that can lead to your happiness. And as you do that, you begin to see things happening in front of you, rightly or wrongly, and you begin to be able to appreciate what is good for you, what is not good for you. That is called judgment. You're able to judge to see what is helpful for you, what is harmful to you. So you're able to judge that, and with that judgment you begin to reason out. Reason out meaning now, if I do this, that will happen to me. The cause and effect, that is reasoning out. Doing one thing will lead to another. That is cause and effect. Right? And finally, to be able to rationalize. Rationalize means to be able to balance your resources. Well, how should I spend my time? How should I dedicate myself to be a better person? So these are some of the things that you can actually help yourself to do. This is thinking. Conscious, rational thinking. These last two lines here are happening in that little small part of your brain, a very small part of your brain that is responsible for that. That is called the prefrontal cortex, PFC. So today, what you have just seen up to now, there are two important words about the brain you got to understand. The first one was amygdala. That is the part of the brain responsible for your suffering. The second one is the prefrontal cortex. That is the part of your brain responsible for your happiness. Because it is this prefrontal cortex that helps you to do these thinking functions. And be able to apply these thinking functions in a productive and positive and beneficial way. That is selective thinking, to be able to choose your thoughts. And we will talk a little bit more about selective thinking as we go along. But if we don't do that, what happens to us? There is a very ancient shloka. Shloka is a kind of ancient teaching in India. Right? It is in Sanskrit. Very ancient teaching. It says, taking food, sleeping, avoiding dangers, and sexual activities, these are common between animals and humans. All organisms do that. We need food in order to stay alive. We need to avoid danger so that our life is protected. We need to rest and sleep. And finally, all organisms in ancient times wanted to live forever, but we know we can't live forever. So how can we ensure that? We can't ensure it happening. What do? We reproduce. So reproduction is actually the process of organisms trying to live longer by passing their genes to the next generation. And this is common to all organisms. Now, then this shloka went on to say, the ability to think is what makes humans different. And if without thinking, humans are just like animals. So if we don't use our thinking brain to choose our thoughts wisely, we are behaving just like animals. So it's very important to understand that we have to learn how to apply our thinking mind to choose our thoughts wisely. And I'm going to go on further. In fact, I will share with you the 4 important things that my teacher, Venerable Dr. Pudanji, has described, how we can do that. And in fact, later on, I'll give you a link to download a meditation guide by him, teaching selective thinking meditation. So there is a process of meditation based on selective thinking. You can download that meditation guide and read it and then learn it. And then maybe the next lecture, you can come and ask me some questions about selective thinking, right, from that book that he has written. So far we've talked very much about the brain, the physiological part. Now let's talk about the mind then. What did the Buddha say about the mind? Now this is what happens. When these impulses are picked up by our sense organs through our nerves, goes to the brain, and there is activity going on in the brain, this activity in the brain, actually in the whole central nervous system, that activity gives rise to an experience of the mind. So the mind is an experience. The mind doesn't exist. But when we ask people, where is your mind? Where do people mostly point to? It's up here. Oh no. You're not pointing to your mind. What are you pointing to? You're pointing to the organ called the brain. The mind is not an entity. The mind is an activity. You can only experience it. You cannot see the mind. You cannot hold the mind. You cannot touch the mind, right? So the mind is really an activity. And in this process of activity, there are three parts of these mental experiences. And the Buddha described them throughout his teaching. He described them as three parts of mental experiences. He used three key words to explain it. The first word he used in Pali. Now I'm going to use Pali because my learning in Buddhism came from the Theravada tradition, where we study what is called the Pali Canyon. That means the original teachings of the Buddha that was transcribed in a language called Pali. The Buddha did not teach in Pali. The Buddha taught in the local dialects. It's amazing, wherever the Buddha went, the sermons he delivered were all in the local dialects. But later on, when they had to transcribe it into a language, they picked Pali as a language. That's why the elders, the Theras, when they put down their teachings, they use Pali to write it, and it's called Pali Canyon. Right? And the Pali words I'm going to show you here, dukkha is a Pali word. So here the Buddha used the word vijnana. Vijnana means the process of perception. And this process of perception is arising as a result of what your sense organs have picked up from the environment. That means when light enters the eye, there is a mental image. See, the whole process is like that. Light enters the eye and it stimulates the retina and the back of your eyeball, and it sends impulses through your optic nerves into the brain, and there is an activity going on in the brain. And this activity gives rise to a mental experience of a mental object arising. Oh, now I see brother over there. Oh, now I see sister sitting there. You know, these mental experiences arising. This is vijnana. The arising of a perception of what you have seen or heard or smelled or tasted or touched from the environment. So that is the first mental experience, perception. The second mental experience, the Buddha used the word mano, which psychologists would describe it as cognitive process. This is the part of the mind that is responsible for thinking, conscious rational thinking, right? And this is responsible for two main categories of thoughts: cognition and conception. Cognition is to be aware of what you have just perceived. Oh, I see him coming. I see Brother Jose. I see Sister Jenny, or Sister Grace, or Sister Dolly, or whoever. So this is cognition, to be able to cognize. So when you're able to cognize somebody you already know, that is what is called recognition. That's why it's the word recognition. Right? That is cognition. There is another part of the mind, mental process involved in this rational thinking or conscious rational thinking called conception. Conception is to create ideas, concepts about what you have seen, heard, smelled, taste, or touch. For example, if you see Brother Johnny coming towards you, and then you thought, oh, Brother Johnny is my good friend. Right? The fact that you are aware he's your good friend and you realize, I like to go to lunch with him. These are conceptions. It's conceiving ideas. Right? So that is what that part of your mind is responsible for. Firstly, it is responsible for interpreting what you have seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. Right? And in this process of interpretation, you begin to give meaning to what you've interpreted. So this whole process is cognition and conception. Cognition is the awareness. Conception is creating ideas. But there is a third part of the mind which we have very little control over. It arises at its own choosing. And this the Buddha calls chitta. And this is what the psychologists would describe as the affective process of mind, commonly called emotions. It leads to mood and temperament, and our reaction resulting from the mood and the temperament, that is our emotional reaction. So this is what chitta is all about, the affective process of mind. And that is basically this the ability to react to feelings. If something is pleasant, you react in one way. If something is unpleasant, you react in another way. So this is reaction depending on the feeling of what you have perceived. But there is also one more part that this chitta does, and I mentioned to you earlier, personalizing the experience. When your hand hits against the wall and it hurts, it says, oh, my hand hurts, the I, me or mine, arising in your mind. This process of personalizing, grasping, they call it, or clinging on. And that is also the function of chitta. That is what chitta will do. So basically, the mind is made of three kinds of mental experiences that are continuously right, interacting with one another. There is no one before the other. They are all interacting at the same time. Right? The part that you are not in control is really this chitta part, which is arising at its own choosing. So we can say we have two kinds of thoughts. Right? We can choose our thoughts, and choosing our thoughts is the work of mano, the cognitive process, choosing our thoughts. But we may also unknowingly allow thoughts to choose us, thoughts arising out of the blue, disturbing our mind, and that is the work of chitta. Right? Even if you try to meditate, even amongst the best meditators there are, sitting there meditating, there will still be moments that unconscious thoughts arise out of the blue. Oh, yesterday somebody said something, I'm not happy with it. This is the work of the chitta. Unconscious thoughts arising. So thoughts are choosing us. So in other words, there's these two processes of thoughts going on. Either we choose thoughts or we allow thoughts to choose us. But the mind, the amazing thing about the mind, it can only focus on one thing at one time. If we are focusing on choosing thoughts, then thoughts will not be choosing us. So if your mind is paying attention on something and locked on to that attention, then these unconscious thoughts will not arise. That's what we do in meditation. The whole process of meditation is to train us to focus on one thing, the object of meditation, and in focusing on the object of meditation, we are not allowing unconscious thoughts arising. And the whole purpose of meditation is to tame the chitta. Right? And the most powerful form of meditation to tame the chitta is called the tranquility meditation. Tranquility meditation basically is called samatha meditation. And what this does is that and this meditation is sometimes translated incorrectly. They call it concentration meditation. But it's not concentration. I will speak on the fourth lecture, more detail about this meditation. Right? So basically, this is what's going on in the mind. Scientists today are beginning to discover how the brain works and what gives rise to mental activity, and they are also beginning to agree in a way to this model that this is really what's going on. There is a part of the mind responsible for perceptions, a part of the mind responsible for cognition and conception, and a part of the mind which then produces this mood and temperament and affective thoughts. Right? So let's take a look at a flow chart of how all this is working. Then we're talking about the process of experience. Experience is really a chain reaction. We have things going on in the environment. Many things happening. They stimulate our five sense organs. Our ears, the nose, tongue, and body, and eyes. Right? And then with the stimulation of these sense organs, it gives rise to the perception. Right? And Buddha calls it vijnana, the perception. Oh, now I see something. The awareness that you have seen something, that is vijnana, perception. Right? So first, the mind is aware that it has seen something. That's why we're able to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Next, at the same time, I wouldn't say next, it's not really next. At the same time, the mind tries to interpret what it has seen, and that is the cognitive process. Trying to interpret, and this interpretation draws from memory of past experiences in order to answer the question, what is this I have seen? Let's take, for example, I show you this bottle. Right? Some of you will say, oh, it's a bottle of mineral water. Right? And some of you might be more aware and might call this a bottle of Gatorade. Whatever it is. Now, how do you know, let's say you think this is a bottle of mineral water. How do you know this is a bottle of mineral water? Because you have seen hundreds of mineral water bottles before. Maybe thousands. And the moment you see something similar, your mind begins to interpret it based on memory of past experiences. So this is really how that works, drawing from memory of past experiences to be able to interpret what you have perceived through your sense organs. And this whole process is cognition. Then what is in pink is that part called the affective process, the emotional part of the mind, the part of the mind that is aroused depending on whether the feeling is pleasant or unpleasant. And that part of the mind, when it arises, it actually causes a lot of things to happen in the brain. It triggers the release of biochemical reactions. Unconscious emotional arousal will trigger the release of autonomic reactions in the body, stress. And this releases releases hormones in the body, causing the body to react. When you felt that tingling sensation in your body when I described scratching the blackboard, that tingling sensation, that is because of the hormones going through your body. And this is tension in the body. You can feel it. That's why it's called a stressor. Stressor are conditions that stress you. So with that feeling, you begin to feel it. That bodily sensation. Oh, it's very unpleasant. This is dukkha. That is what the Buddha meant, dukkha. It starts with bodily reaction. It doesn't matter whether it is something somebody said to you, or something somebody did to you, or it is something you saw, heard, smelled, taste, or touch. It first triggers some reactions in the body. Then only the mind gets disturbed. So here, the first part I'm describing is the physiological disturbance in the body. Right? So this is really happening in the body first. I'm going to show you later on what happens in the mind. So first in the body, the physiological disturbance. So let's take a look at this fight or flight reaction.
Fear is so important for our survival, we do something absolutely remarkable. Our bodies begin to react to a threat before we're even consciously aware of what the threat might be. Because when we're faced with danger, milliseconds count. At the first hint of danger, early warning signals are sent to the brain via the optic nerve, to our tiny and primitive fear center, the amygdala. This prepares our body for action. Next, nerve pulses are fired down the spinal cord to the adrenal glands near our kidneys. This triggers a release of adrenaline. Now we're on full alert. Adrenaline is the vital hormone that can flood our body in a split second. As it reaches our lungs, we breathe more deeply and take in more oxygen. It also makes our heart beat faster. Oxygen-rich blood is diverted to our muscles. They are now charged springs, waiting for the signal to run or fight. All this before our conscious mind has even registered a threat. This reaction to fear has evolved over millions of years and is known as the fight or flight response.
So this has evolved over millions of years, and the first thing it does is causes changes in the body. What kind of changes? When you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch anything, whatever it is, the brain sends a signal down the sympathetic nervous system, and it begins to reach various parts of your body. When it reaches organs, your like adrenal glands, it reaches your glands. Adrenal gland is located directly above your kidneys. There's two of them. It begins to release very powerful stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And it causes changes in the body. It causes your heart to beat faster, blood pressure to rise. It causes body temperature to rise, and also your muscles are all tensed up and so on. It also causes other reactions in the body. Hair standing on end. Right? Besides muscle tension, hair stands on end. It causes your pupils to dilate. Right? So you can see here, right? Facial expression changes. Muscles are all tensed up. Right? Hair standing on end. In animals you can see it, but in human being with our tiny little hair we can't see it, but we call it goosebumps, goose pimples. When you feel goosebumps or goose pimple, that's your hair standing on end. And You have to be careful because there are all these various parts of your facial. If you get all tensed up too much, it causes wrinkles. Right? And you start to get all kinds of wrinkles in your face. We call them railway tracks on your face. Now, it doesn't just happen in women, it also happens in men. So you can see it happens whether men or women, we get wrinkles all over. And then it increases your blood sugar, and finally it suppresses your immune system. If you look at it, how harmful it is, huh? If your immune system is suspended, what happens? You can fall sick very easily. If your blood sugar level rises frequently, what happens? You become diabetic. If your perspiration and trembling occurs too often, body temperature changes a lot, you get sick very easily. Facial expression distorted, what happens? You get wrinkles all over your face. And pupils dilate too much. What happens when you grow old? You lose your eyesight. You can't focus anymore. Right? And hair standing on end. Sooner or later, there's no more hair to stand on end. Right? And muscles becomes all tensed up. What happens? Then you get all kinds of aches: body ache, neck ache, shoulder ache, right? Back ache, all kinds of aches. Intestinal movement being suspended. What happens? Then you get ulcers. Your ulcer condition worsens, and then respiration deepens, and what happens? Then it causes hyperventilation, and finally blood pressure rises too much, hypertension. Your heart beat too much, too often. You don't live so long. You die young. How unhealthy it is. We got to learn to tame that part that is going on. Now you can't stop it happening. Something that arouses you, something that frightens you or causes this stress reaction, you can't stop that reaction happening. But when it does happen, when you become aware of it, and that's what is called mindfulness. When you become aware that it is happening, you can learn how to tame it down and how to relax. And I'm going to show you later a very simple self-compassion, 3-step self-compassion, how you can actually tame yourself in that. So let's go further, go back to this chart here. Now the body is stressed and you're beginning to feel bodily sensations, and this is called dukkha, stress. Now, at this point, when that is happening, the mind is being disturbed one more time. You're no longer only disturbed by what you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. You're also disturbed by these bodily sensations that's going on. And that is when it triggers up the mind. Memory of past experiences arises. Imagination of some uncertainties in the future arise. Expectation of changing the present moment arises. So these three things arise. They lead to you to feel lust, greed, hatred, anger, anxiety, worries, frustration, various emotional states. And these emotional states, when they arise, what do? They disturb your thinking mind. Remember that mano is your thinking mind, your rational thinking mind. Chitta is your emotional mind. And your emotional mind, when all this arise, begin to disturb your thinking mind. What happens? You cannot think rationally anymore. Your sense of judgment is shut down because of that. Scientists have proven, and I'm going to show you next week, right, with how to tame your greed and hatred. And we're going to take a look at that next week. And scientists have proven that when this arises, your judgment is shut down. You can't judge things properly anymore. This is already, the scientists have discovered that. So basically, this is really what's going on. This process here is called distress. Distress is mental suffering. And the Buddha uses the word domanassa. It means mental suffering. It is, and earlier on, what I described earlier on is physical suffering. Now it's mental suffering. So now you have two kinds of suffering going on. Physical suffering, mental suffering. Physical suffering, we can't stop it quickly, but we can calm down. Mental suffering, we can prevent it if we are able to train our mind. So in other words, physical suffering arises at its own choosing, but mental suffering is optional. We can learn how to tame down. We don't have to suffer mentally, emotionally, if we learn how to relax. So today we're going to show a little bit of how to relax. Because if we don't do that, what happens then? The Buddha then went on to explain about the mind. He says, emotions dominate the world. Emotion create distress. Distress is mental suffering. Emotion is the one thing to which all are spellbound. Meaning, when emotion arises and dominates us, it controls us, we are stuck. we are no longer able to overcome it. If we allow it to take control, we can no longer overcome it. Right? So that is what the Buddha has described. And this is really what's going on inside the mind. Now let's go back to the root of the Buddha's teaching. And this is really talking about the first part. Right? We had 4 noble truths. The first one is that there is dukkha. And what I have just explained a moment ago, there is dukkha, and what is dukkha from a scientific perspective. Now we're going to take a look at the origin of dukkha, the second noble truth. What did the Buddha say about the second noble truth? The origin of dukkha. And that is, the Buddha has described that it is because of this craving. Now this is the common translation of the Pali word tanha. I'll explain later on. Tanha is a much better translation by my teacher, but commonly the common translation by Westerners is craving. They call it craving. It is craving that leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight, lust, and seeking delight here and there. Which means when we suffer, when we experience unhappiness, we want to look for alternate avenues of release that makes us happy. We want to enjoy something that can make us happier. Right? We like to do that. We like to be distracted from our problems. That's why some people drink. They get drunk. They think that drinking is a solution. And some people gamble. Some people do other things. Right? They indulge in all kinds of sexual pleasures in order to forget their problems, right? Drown their sorrows in whatever it is. Right? So that is really what's going on. And then there is craving for sensual pleasures, which means now people want something pleasurable. There is also craving for non-existence. It is something they want to get rid of. They want it to stop. And then there is this craving of continued existence. They want it to go on forever. So there's 3 kinds of craving. And the first kind is talking about lust and greed. That means you're seeking for pleasures. The second kind is talking about something unpleasant you want to get rid of, aversion and hatred. Right? Lust turns into greed if lust is not stopped. Aversion turns into hatred if aversion is not stopped. How does that work? When we experience something pleasurable, when we seek something pleasurable to indulge in, that seeking is lust. We lust for something pleasurable. But as we experience these pleasures, as we gain the pleasure, we begin to want more of it. We are never enough. That's why some people drink 1 bottle, not enough. Then they drink a second bottle, and then a third bottle. After enjoying a lot of beer, oh, not enough. Now they start to go into hard liquor. They drink whiskey, right? Suntory or whatever. Right? So basically, lust turns into greed if lust is not tamed. In the same manner, aversion. Aversion means avoiding. Something unpleasant, you want to avoid it. But sometimes you can't avoid it, you're stuck with it. And it keeps coming back at you. So aversion turns into hatred. Because if you can't avoid something unpleasant and it keeps coming back to you, what happens? You begin to hate it. You begin to get angry about it and hate it. So aversion turns into hatred. This is really what this is describing. The third condition is really talking about the delusion of a self-centered existence. I want to live on forever. I want to go on living. I don't want to die tomorrow. Who wants to die tomorrow? So this is really the delusion of a self-centered existence. These 3 conditions are called lobha, dosa, and moha. In Pali, lobha simply is referring to the lust and the greed for something pleasurable. Dosa is referring to the aversion and hatred towards something unpleasant. And moha is this delusion of a self-centered existence, that it's all about me. I am the most important thing in the universe. So this is a self-centered existence. And the word tanha, my teacher has pointed out, more accurately is translated as emotional reaction. It is this emotional reaction that leads to our suffering. So when we react to things emotionally, it leads us to more suffering. That's why we got to learn how to tame our emotions. So when all this is happening, then what will it lead us to? It will lead us to make decisions, unwise decisions, based on lust or greed, aversion or hatred, delusion of self-centered existence, and this is volition. In other words, the decision we make that can affect our life. And then we begin to do something about it, take action. Right? And that action that we take is called karma. So when we have volition, the intention, we begin to want to take something. And the danger here is, the Buddha pointed out, there are 10 things that we have to avoid. These are the 10 dangers of karma, 10 unwholesome karmas, 10 unwholesome actions. One is harming life. Number 2 is taking what is not given, or some people say stealing, right? Now, this is important. Taking what is not given is not only going to steal from somebody. If something is sitting there, it doesn't belong to you, and you just take it. Well, you didn't go and steal it from someone, you just took it, but it didn't belong to you. So that is also taking what is not given. Yeah? So that's simple as that. Like somebody left an iPhone in a restaurant and left. Nobody else in the restaurant, there's a table there is a nice little iPhone 8 sitting there, and somebody said, oh, nice phone, I'm going to take it, I'm going to keep it. I didn't steal it. Oh, then they would think I didn't commit any crime because I didn't steal. No. In the Buddhist teaching, that is wrong. Because you are taking what is not given to you. That is what we should also avoid. Taking what is not given. Then there is sexual misconduct. There is false speech. Now here, false speech is talking about speaking falsehood, telling lies. There are 4 kinds of speech which are unwholesome. First is saying things which are incorrect, knowingly incorrect. Second one is malicious speech or divisive speech. That means you say something to cause people to fight amongst themselves. You are causing trouble, troublemaking, by saying things that cause trouble, malicious speech. And then the third kind of harmful, unwholesome speech is harsh speech or harmful speech. Saying something to hurt other people's feeling. You're saying something to make people feel bad, make people unhappy, right? And that is harsh speech or harmful speech. And the fourth one is gossip. You didn't create the lie, but you are spreading it. And it is happening to many of us nowadays with modern technology. We receive something in Facebook, what do? We repost it. Or we receive a message in Facebook Messenger, what do many of us do? We send it to 30 people in our list. And very often some of these messages are talking about things which are not true. They may be fake news. So we didn't tell lies, but we are spreading lies by other people. That is called gossip. Or another translation of that is called useless speech. We're spreading useless speech or rumors. Right? So rumors, useless speech, and gossip. Then comes things to do with the mind. Covetous means to want something that other people have, now you wish for it. You are craving for something that other people have, and you don't have it, but you really want it. You want to lust for other people's things, other people's belongings and things like that. You want to lust for it. So this is called covetousness. And then number 9 is ill will and hatred, right? This anger and hatred towards other people. And finally, having wrong view and delusion of self-centered existence and wrong view about what is going on in the world, right? So this is really the 10 kind of unwholesome activities many people indulge in one way or another. And the first 3 deals with the body. So when you talk about harming life, you're using your body to hurt or harm other people. Then taking what is not given, you're using your hand to take it. Sexual misconduct, this is misuse of the body. And then comes speech, right? Those 4 speech, and then comes the mind. Desiring for other people's things, that is all in your mind. Ill will, the hatred and anger, and the wrong view. So these are basically unwholesome activities of the mind. So there are these 10 unwholesome activities many of us indulge in some degree, one way or another, right? So when that is happening, what happens? We take action, we do things, and that is called karma. The word karma refers to action. It doesn't refer to the result. A lot of people have misunderstood this. Westerners, they use the word karma to mean more than just the action, mean the result. But actually there's another word for result. Well, karma is basically unskillful action. Result is called vipaka. So these 3 things go together. Intention or volition, that is called cetana. Action, that is called karma. And consequences, outcome, that is called vipaka. These 3 things always go together. So a lot of people have misused the word karma to mean consequence. Oh, it's your karma. Actually, what it really is, you have done something. That is your karma. And as a result of what you've done, you created an outcome which comes back to hurt you. And that's what happens. It comes back and enters your life again. In the Buddhist teaching, it could happen right away. In other words, there are various degrees of happening. This result can happen to you right away. For example, you're driving on the street and somebody cuts you in, and you got very angry, and so you slam on horn, and the guy in front got very angry. He got out of the car and started to come to you and maybe break your windscreen wiper. You see, by honking that person and expressing your anger, you are creating instant result, because the person in front of you is more angry than you. He's capable of more violent actions than you. So you are doing something which then causes the outcome, immediate outcome. But outcome can also happen later on. Maybe not right away. If you did something wrong, later on, it comes back to haunt you later on. Or it can come back to haunt you at the end of your life, at the time of your dying, during your last moments in life, right? Or it can even come back to haunt you in your future lives, in your rebirth, your immediate rebirth as well as your future rebirths. So vipaka can come back to affect you not only immediately or later on, but at the end of your life, and maybe also in your next life and future lives. So that is what will come back to hurt you. So the Buddha taught we have a way to overcome this, and that is the use of our thinking, cognition. He says, cognition precedes all experiences. It predominates and creates all realities. And this is the very first verse of the Dhammapada, the sayings of the Buddha, where he pointed out that it is the way we think that can change our life. So the Buddha's teaching is very humanistic. The Buddha's teaching is not about God up there. It's not that we are looking at God in one way or another. We don't even have to examine that. We basically look at what really is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. The essence of the Buddha's teaching is humanism, humanistic Buddhism. Buddhism is a humanistic religion. Now, there are many aspects of Buddhism that actually represents religion, because if you say what is among some of the important things about religion, you talk about gods. Yes, in Buddhism there are gods, but the concept of gods in Buddhism is different from the concept of gods in Christianity, because here there are heavenly beings, and in Buddhism we call them gods, but those heavenly beings have a lifespan. So there is a notion of God in Buddhism. And there are also other various aspects. There are also notions of hell realm. When you die, you can be reborn in hell. So that is also part of Buddhism. So in a way, there are many aspects of Buddhism you can say it is a religion. But what kind of religion? It is not a theistic religion, not centered around God. What is it? It is a humanistic religion. So Buddhism is a humanistic religion. So now let's take a look at the meaning of the word humanistic. It is a doctrine, attitude, or way of life centered around human interests or human values, especially a philosophy that usually rejects supernaturalism and stresses on the individual's dignity and worth and capacity for self-realization through reason. Being able to think and reason out, that is what the humans can do. Otherwise, we are like animals. So learning how to think, selective thinking, and this is actually found in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definition of humanistic. So being able to think, the Buddha point out that things happen around us and we should stay clear of these two extremes. One is that we get emotionally aroused, we react. The other extreme is that we force ourselves not to react. But the Buddha said, no, you learn the middle way, and there is a teaching of the middle way. To avoid emotional reactions, and then also to avoid forceful effort to restrain your emotions. And there is the middle way. And what is the middle way? And this is really how we can learn how to choose our thoughts wisely. First, to learn how to relax, conscious relaxation. Secondly, it is introspective attention, to bring your attention inwards and being able to be aware of what's going on inside your body and your mind. Introspective attention. And the third one is basically to tame your mind to a state where now you are peaceful. And the ultimate state of peacefulness is this mental equilibrium. Or actually there's another word for it called equanimity. So there's the word equanimity is also mental equilibrium. And this is all explained in great details in this Eightfold Way, the Sublime Eightfold Way. Some people call this the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is really the full teachings. That we have these two extremes we should avoid. Right. I've skipped that one. Okay. The middle way, the first one, conscious relaxation. What does it mean? It simply means that when something happens to us, don't react right away. Right? Consciously release the tensions in your body and calm your mind first. And this is made of two steps. Pause and then relax. So when something happens around you and makes you get excited, angry or anxious or whatever, you can, do not react right away. Learn to relax first. Pause means don't react, stop whatever you're doing, then relax, take a deep breath, and then only bring your attention inwards. Introspective attention, gently bring attention inwards, then mindfully observe what's going on inside. Why am I affected by this? How am I affected by this? Mindfully observe bodily and mental activities. Introspect and think. Why? What is affecting? Why is it making me? Why is it affecting me? What is it making me think? Bring your mind in. Why do I think like that? Question yourself. And then you are able to calm your mind, still the mind. So in the course of the next few lectures, I hope to explain much further these further steps. Right? Today we will look at pause, relax, and think. Then we'll talk about mental equilibrium further on. Right? Basically, mental equilibrium is about bringing the mind to a state of stillness. That the mind is now at peace, and some people call this state equanimity. Right? So, still the mind, free of emotional arousals and excitement, and this is abandoning the 5 hindrances. So basically, mental equilibrium is about this state of equanimity. The first one, conscious relaxation, is pause, relax. In other words, when something arouses your emotion, don't react right away. Just pause for a moment and then learn to relax, and then bring your attention inwards, introspect, and ask yourself, how is it affecting me? Why is it affecting me? What is it making me do? What is it making me think? Why am I thinking this way? So you're questioning yourself. And when you're able to question that, you're able then to realize how things around you are affecting you and how you can overcome it in a more wise manner. Because when you understand what's going on and how it affects you, you will be able to learn how to find a better solution, how to overcome that. So we're going to take a look at these 3 things. We call it the 3-step self-compassion. Step number 1, pause. What does pause do for you? It allows time for emotional excitement and anxiety in the body to calm down. And at the same time, also all these hormones that are being released in your body, hormonal reactions in the body to subside. Because hormonal reactions cannot stop right away. The moment they are released, even though you're no longer releasing new hormones, it is still flooding through your body. It will take time to calm down. It's like turning off a hot plate. When you have in your kitchen, you have a hot plate. You switch off the electricity to the hot plate. What happens? The hot plate is still a little bit hot. It takes time to cool down. In the same fashion, your body, when these hormones are released, these hormones are already causing reactions in your body. It takes a little bit of time for it to subside. And therefore, you need to pause to allow time for it to subside. And to help it subside faster, then you learn to relax. Take deep breath. Relax the body. And consciously compose the mind to respond. Only at this point when you are relaxed are you ready to respond, because only at this point when you are relaxed, then you are able to think more wisely, and that is purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. That thinking part. Don't try to think right away, because When something happens and arouses your emotions, if you try to think right away, chances are your thinking is very emotionally biased. You must learn to pause, relax, and then only when you are adequately composed, then only you think. Right? Because thinking is a very important thing, as this psychologist pointed out, William James, he says, the greatest weapon we have against stress is our ability to choose our thoughts. Choose our thoughts. Selective thinking. Not allow thoughts to choose us. Emotional thoughts are allowing thoughts to choose us. In other words, emotional thoughts, when they arise, they choose us at their own choosing. We can't control that. But if we learn to relax and focus on what's going on, bring our attention inwards, we are then placing the mind focused on one thing at a time. See, the mind can only be focused on one thing at a time. It is not multitasking. This idea that we can multitask with the mind, that is a delusion. That doesn't exist. The mind can only focus on one thing at a time. You might be focusing on a few things, jumping back and forth, but that is not really focusing on many things at the same time. It's only one thing at a time. So focus your mind on one thing at a time. Pause, relax, and focus on how you can solve the problem. So that is really choosing our thoughts. And even another psychologist, Viktor Frankl, has also pointed out, he says, responsibility is our ability to respond to any problem. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. And in those choices lie our freedom, our growth, and our happiness. What does that mean? Between stimulus and response, stimulus are things happening around us, stimulating, arousing us. Response is the way we react to it. So between something happening and us reacting to it, there is a space. Here the word space means gap, a moment in time. Right? And in that moment, you have a chance to think about what you're going to do. That's really what it is. In that space lies our freedom. We are free to create that space and think before we respond. Our freedom and our power to choose our thoughts, choose our response, and in those choices, what we think can change our lives, bring us happiness or bring us more suffering. So this is really what this means. And the Buddha taught how we can help ourselves to choose our thoughts. So the Buddha taught in one of his sermons called the Vitakasantana Sutra. This is actually the Buddha's methods on removal of distracting thoughts. How you can choose the way you think to help you overcome thoughts that are disturbing you. He says, first, when there is any unwholesome thoughts that are arising that is disturbing you, what should you do? Number one, give attention to something else. Something else which is good. Something else which is helpful. In other words, change the channel. Your mind can either be focused on something that is hurting you or focus on something that is helping you. So change the channel. So in other words, change your mind to focus on something else that makes you feel better. But this has to be something good, not going into and indulging in all kinds of sensual pleasures, but an image contrary to this image that is disturbing you, and this alternate image is wholesome, worthy to be reflected upon. So there are many things. Now, in fact, I was just giving this lecture a few days ago to a bunch of kids, and this works for kids. And you know what I taught them to choose? Think about your mother. That's what it is. Children, when they're in school, somebody bully them and they get angry. Instead of thinking about the person who made them angry, think about their mother. The moment they think about their mother, you know what it is like. Young kids, their mothers are the most loving person in their life. The moment they think about the most loving person in their life, what does it do to them? It mellows them down. It softens them down. So there are many kinds of such thoughts you can come up with that can help you. Think of something helpful in your life. It doesn't have to be connected to what's hurting you. When these things arouse your emotions and they hurt you, change your mind to just focus on something else. Now, if you cannot find something to focus on, and this is also what the Buddha taught in meditation, focus on your breath. Somebody upsets you and you get angry, what do you do? Close your eyes, take a deep breath. Now focus on breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. I'm taking a long breath. I'm taking a short breath. Now if your mind is now focused on breathing, what happens to your anger? Subside. That's the way to stop the anger. You can't stop the anger like this. Somebody makes you angry. You say, okay, anger, stop, stop, stop. You can't do that. But what you can do, take a deep breath. Focus on your breathing. And that is alternate image, something else. There are also other teachings. This is something I don't normally teach, but it's very helpful. A Tibetan monk taught to me many years ago. I used to have a Tibetan guru many years ago. He's gone somewhere else. I don't see him anymore, but he taught me this method. Instead of focusing on your breath, there's also another thing you can focus on. Place your thumb between your fourth and your fifth finger, very gently, just touching only, just only touching. Close your eyes and observe the sensations. Try that. Observe what's going on. You can begin to feel your heartbeat. You try that. You can begin to feel your heartbeat. That is another thing you can focus on. Your thumb on the fourth and fifth finger, just only barely touching. Relax. No tension. With your eyes closed, you can begin to feel your heartbeat. So this is something I used when I'm really very angry. Because when I'm very angry, my breath is very erratic. So very hard to focus on my breath. So instead of focusing on my breath, I focus on my heartbeat. So this is another way. Right? So these are some of the things. Change your mind, change the channel in your mind. That's what it is. Okay, so that's the first method. The Buddha taught 5 methods. Now if that doesn't work, now this is all progressive. If that doesn't work, what's the next thing? Then the Buddha says, examine the danger. In other words, somebody aroused your emotions and you want to react in a certain way. And then you begin, now he says, examine the danger and consider the evil consequences of your evil thoughts. In other words, now you want to fight him back. In your mind, you are very angry. There's something you want to do to hurt him. Now consider, what is the danger of hurting that person? Like I said, if you could be driving the car, somebody cuts in front of you. Now instead of just one honk and then let him go, some people, when somebody cuts in, they press the horn forever. Honk, 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 honk. And then the car in front gets very angry. What does he do? He jumps out of his car, walks up to your car, break your windscreen wiper, goes back into his car. What happens? You're making things worse. Right? So this second one, consider the evil consequence. So if somebody cuts in front of you, if you keep honking, 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 are you solving the problem? No. You could be escalating the level of anger and hatred between you and that person. So consider these consequences. When somebody makes you angry and you want to react, consider your reaction and the outcome, the evil consequences of your reaction. If that still doesn't work and your mind is still disturbed by thoughts, now you really have this very terrible evil thoughts, you want to hurt the other person back, then the whole idea is to take your mind off it. Stop paying attention on these thoughts and stop reflecting on it by allowing your mind to just let go. Learn to let go. This is also very important. Learn to let go. Forgiveness. So one of the ways to learn to let go here is forgiveness. Learn to forgive. Now I have always pointed out 3 things bring happiness in our life. And I speak about that in Buddhist circle. I also use this. If you were to come on Tuesday, I also use this to teach during laughter yoga. Wonderful way. 3 things lead to happiness: forgiveness, gratitude, and kindness. Forgiveness deals with the past. Something happened in the past, makes you very angry. You must learn to forgive. That's how you can let go. Gratitude deals with the present. Be grateful for whatever we have. We have the opportunity to come here and share the Dharma. Be grateful for this opportunity. Right? Kindness deals with the future. Whatever you have to do, whatever you do, react, whatever it is you're going to do it with kindness. And when you begin to do things with kindness, kindness begets kindness. Everything you do with kindness, what happens? In your future, people will be kind to you because you have been kind to people. See, these are some of the things you can do to learn to release, let go. Do not give attention. Forget really doesn't mean completely forget about it, but learn how to let go. Right? This letting go is forgiveness, gratitude, and kindness. So that can help you do that. Now, if that doesn't work, what happens? Next, you're going to examine your thoughts, how it arises and how this thought formation arises. Right? And focus on relaxation and calmness. By observing how your thoughts arise, what is he saying that is affecting me? Why am I affected in this way? What is it making me angry about? So all these things you ask yourself, introspection. Bring your mind inwards and ask yourself, what is going on in your body? What's going on in your mind? So this is number 4 step, stilling the thought. Right? Finally, up to this point, basically, people are able to learn to calm down. But finally, if all else doesn't work, the last one, and my teacher translated it very clearly, because there are many translations. I must point out to this. In this sutra, Majjhima Nikaya number 20, where the Buddha spoke about the 5 steps to removal of distracting thoughts, the 5th one has many different kinds of translations. But my teacher translated this. He says, when we get angry, what happens? Our teeth are clenched together, right? Our muscles are all tensed up here, right? And our fists are all... So what do? We learn to let go, relax, and then our tongue is pressed up against the palate. So that is when we are in the most extreme case of anger and hatred. Learn to relax the teeth. Be conscious that your teeth are now biting at each other. Just relax. Be conscious that your tongue is pressing against the palate. Just let it go. Be conscious that this part of your neck is very tense. Just release the tension from there. And your fist is all holding up, ready to punch somebody. Let it go. So learn to relax. So my teacher says, relax the clenched teeth, relax the tongue that is pressed in the palates, then you can remove the thoughts associated with it. It's only by relaxing and calming the mind. So focus on relaxation. This is really the 5 different ways to choose your thoughts when your mind is disturbed by disruptive thoughts, evil thoughts of revenge and vengeance. Right? So always come back to this 3-step self-compassion. Pause, relax, and think. That's really ultimately the best way to overcome, to choose right thoughts. The Buddha teaching is really very deep. There's a whole lot of things that the Buddha taught, but we cannot cover that in a few lectures. But there is one particular saying of the Buddha that can summarize all his teaching in basically one quick one, and that is here. He says, abandon evil ways, enter the good life, purify one's mind. That is the teaching of the Buddha. There is another alternate translation to this. This is actually, many of you may have heard it. It is avoid evil, do good. We have heard that. Avoid evil, do good, purify our mind. But my teacher actually explained it more accurately. He says, abandon evil ways. Because these evil thoughts arise from within us. We may not be able to avoid it. These are emotional thoughts that choose us. We didn't choose them, they choose us. So now we learn to let go, abandon them. So abandon evil ways simply means whatever it is, let it go by not harming yourself and not harming others. Right? So when you are able to do that, you don't harm yourself, you don't harm others. The next one, enter the good life. It's not just about doing good, but changing your life towards a life of goodness. Learn how to cultivate peace, wellness, and harmony with the world, and that will bring you happiness with all beings. And finally, purifying your mind simply means to be able to cultivate this tranquility in your mind. Right, so this is actually the tranquility meditation I'm talking about, and then also attaining insight into realities, and this is the insight meditation. Tranquility meditation is samatha meditation. Insight meditation is vipassana meditation. So these are the 2 kinds of meditation that we can learn. And there are many different kinds of meditation. There is also metta and karuna. There are also other kinds of meditation, like meditation on the 32 parts of the body, or meditation based on a dead corpse. Right? So these are various, or meditation on the foulness of the body. So there are various kinds of meditation you can do. Right? So there, in this case, purifying the mind, simply put, the 2 categories of meditation will be sufficient. Tranquility meditation, which is samatha, and insight meditation, which is vipassana. So this is a summary of the Buddha's teaching. Then the third noble truth is talking about there is an ending. And I'm going to talk more about this in future lectures, so I won't dwell into detail. Saying that this craving can be ended and we can give it up and relinquish it. We don't have to hold on to it, no clinging to it. We become free from it, freedom from it. And finally we no longer rely on it, we no longer make use of it. And that is really this craving. And craving is the word tanha. Right? It's really our emotional reaction, and that means stopping this emotional reaction. And finally, the fourth noble truth is that the way leading to the ending of suffering is the noble eightfold path, or the sublime eightfold way. The first two, we are more or less talked a little bit about the first one here. What I have gone through today is very much about right view, understanding what can affect you and how you can purify your mind, right intentions. And in the next week we will talk a little bit about the intentions and the speech, action and livelihood, where we talk about how we can tame greed and hatred, right? And then we talk about loving kindness on the third lecture, and the fourth lecture I will talk about meditation. Fourth lecture here I will talk about the meditation. So my teacher pointed out, now I'm not going to explain this in detail, it is found in the book. I will give you the link to download his book, the soft copy of his book. It says you can learn how to cultivate, right? And the progress of this cultivation in yourself is first association with people who are mature in spirit. Second is hearing the Dharma, hearing people explain to you the teachings of the Buddha. And the thirdly is deterministic thinking, that is being able to discern right from wrong. And this is really discerning thinking, and this in Pali is called yoniso manasikara. So, and finally the fourth one is to reorientate your thinking, your body and your life towards a life that can help you overcome this problem. All this is found in his book. I'll give you the link in a moment. And basically, in a nutshell, purifying one's mind, if we take it one level further, it can help us awaken to the human's boundless potential. And we can draw from psychologists, and one of the most powerful teaching a psychologist has taught is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We begin behaving like animals because we need food, right? Self-preservation. We need food and shelter. And then we begin to look for safety, right? And rest. And when we have these things, we begin to look for relationships and reproduction. And then we have that, then we begin to look for something to accomplishment, self-esteem. And that's where we practice the 4 C's, which are not very wise. We begin to compare with each other. We begin to compete with each other. We begin to become conceited when we get it and other people don't get it. So this is really the unwholesome 4 C's. But if we take this cultivation one level higher, then we take it to the highest self. And now we have the wholesome 3 C's. The wholesome 3 C's is we learn to connect, we learn to communicate and share, and then we learn to cooperate or collaborate with people to bring us happiness. In a nutshell, this is really Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But Abraham Maslow is of course talking about the worldly, mundane needs. But we can rise above this, because in the teachings of the Buddha, we can now even go one level higher than this. And this is to transcend beyond this. And this is going beyond this mundane existence. Now we attain a level of awakening. And the Pali word for awakening is Nibbana. That's really what it is. We can cultivate to attain a state of Nibbana where we become awakened. And then we will be able to cultivate ourselves and bring our whole life into a state of awakening. And Buddha was the awakened one. So let's take a last look at what happened there. Let's take a look at Buddha, the awakened one.
There is a story of a Brahmin who one day found the Buddha under a tree, calmly meditating. The Buddha's mind was still. He radiated such power and strength that the Brahmin was reminded of a tusker elephant. The Brahmin asked him who he was. Imagine a lotus that had begun life underwater, the Buddha replied. But grew and rose above the surface until it stood free. So I too have transcended the world and attained the supreme enlightenment. Who are you then? The Brahmin wondered. Remember me, the Buddha said, as the one who woke up.
So Buddha is the awakened one, right? Awakened from what? Awakened from this samsaric journey, this samsara of birth and rebirth. Just as a lotus born in the water, grown up in the water, rises above the water and remains unsoiled by the water. So using the lotus as the example. A lotus grows in muddy ponds. If the water is too clear, the lotus won't grow very well. So in muddy ponds, it starts to rise and actually rises above the surface and then flowers. That's the beauty of the lotus. Then so is the Buddha. Though born in this world, grown up in the world, rises above the world, he remains unsoiled by the world and become awakened. And therefore he is the awakened one. And I shall finish with a conclusion. We have shared today the teachings of the Buddha from a scientific perspective. Sensations and feelings excite our emotions. Reactions to excitement lead to this condition called lobha, dosa, moha, which is lust and greed, anger and hatred, and the delusion of self-centered existence. And by conscious relaxation and introspective attention, we can learn how to calm our emotional excitement and tame our lustful, hateful reactions and tame our emotional excitement. The simple practice is pause, relax, and think. Right? And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much.